Welcome to the Focolare Word of Life podcast for January 2023. My name is Nick Cianforani and I'll be your host. My wish for this new year is that you may experience abundant blessings of joy, peace, and good health. The Word of Life is a phrase chosen from Scripture each month and shared around the world and that we're all invited to live. The experiences that we're about to listen to in this episode relate to the scripture phrase, learn to do good, seek justice, taken from Isaiah chapter 1, verse 17. Every day, each one of us is called in a specific way to live our lives according to the will of God. It's specific to each of us, but the goal is the same, to get to heaven. Pope Francis clearly said, quote, "We must take on the smell of the sheep," end of quote. This is a simple way of saying that our thoughts and actions must be aimed at how we love our neighbor. Many times we look for the big and heroic ways to love those around us. But simple ways of loving our neighbor are often the best way to make our environment a better place in which to live. A smile, an inquiry asking how the day is going, or perhaps taking the shopping cart to the area designated for its return, out of love for the person who is collecting them, are ways of learning to do good and seeking justice for all. So let's search for those small ways to recognize each neighbor that we encounter each day. This may just be the specific plan God has for you on any given day. In today's episode, Clare DeMontier tells of her effort to do good and keep peace in the legal system as her colleague challenges her credentials. Lori Chesser, an immigration lawyer from DeMoine, Iowa, shares how she realizes that she needed to enter into the reality of her clients and understand their situation. We conclude this podcast with an enlightening experience by Joe Sopala from Austin, Texas. Welcome, Clare. We're delighted that you're able to join us today.
Thank you, Nick. It's a pleasure to be here.
Your experience touched me deeply, Clare, but before you share it, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I had previously lived in Appleton, Wisconsin, and my husband and I moved to Tucson, Arizona in 2020. We have two sons, Ben and Clark, and they live in Honolulu and Boston.
Wonderful, Clare. So could you share your experience with us now?
I would be happy to, Nick. Thank you. In one of my cases, I was appointed guardian ad litem for two children. A guardian ad litem is an attorney appointed by the court to represent the best interest of a child. In this case, the children's grandparents had asked the court to have custody of the children. They said that their daughter-in-law was neglecting the children and that their son had medical problems and therefore was presently unable to take care of the children. The mother denied these claims and requested that the children be in her custody. At the first court hearing, I recommended to the court that it was in the children's best interest that they live with their grandparents until the issues were sorted out. I had no previous experience with the attorney who was representing the children's mother. This attorney was furious with my recommendation. She filed a motion with the court accusing me of not knowing what I was doing and asked that I be removed from the case.
Oh my goodness, Clare, that must have been something you never expected.
I was shocked. Since becoming an attorney 36 years earlier, I had never been in a position to defend myself of not doing my job correctly. But I remembered that Jesus said that to be his disciple, we had to deny ourselves, pick up our cross, and follow him in Matthew 16:24. I embraced Jesus in this suffering I felt. I had to try to love the other attorney to restore peace between us. It was very difficult due to the pain of the attack on my professional work by this lawyer. At first, because I was so uncomfortable defending myself and my work, I thought I would just resign from the case. But my husband encouraged me not to resign. So as painful as it was, I wrote up a response to her accusations. In the end, this turned out to be an opportunity to tell the judge of my work experience, since he was new and had never met with me. I told him that I had had more than 300 appointments as guardian ad litem in that county over 7 years. I filed my resume with the court and a letter of recommendation from a prosecuting attorney with whom I had worked for 14 years. He talked about the quality of my work. In the end, the judge did remove me, but said repeatedly, "You did nothing wrong." This was in itself very painful. This decision confused me. I did not expect it. The other attorney smiled broadly at the end of the hearing because she had won by having me removed from the case. I knew I would see this lawyer again in the courthouse. I resolved to forgive her and strive to start over. The next time I saw her in the courthouse, I fought against my natural reaction. I smiled and said, "Good morning." The other lawyer looked very confused by this. I continued to smile and greet her whenever I saw her. It was very, very difficult, but I did it with the honest intention to love my neighbor. About 6 months later, I was appointed guardian ad litem in another case in which this same lawyer was involved. I had to meet her at the client's home. I dreaded it and was very uncomfortable. I worried that she would do the same thing in this case. However, I was surprised. She was cordial, smiling, and respectful. We ended up having a very good, peaceful working relationship.
That's such a wonderful conclusion to your efforts to love, Claire. It was also nice to see how your husband was helpful and encouraging.
He was absolutely right. And it was hard, but I'm so grateful to him because for the rest of my life, I would have felt bad about the whole thing.
Thanks again, Claire, for joining us. It was a pleasure having you.
And thank you for letting me share this experience.
Welcome to our podcast, Lori. We are really delighted to have you with us today.
Thank you, Nick. It's great to be here.
We're anxious to hear your experience, but before we do, could you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I live in Des Moines, Iowa with my husband, John Chesser. We raised 2 daughters here, but now one of them's married and on the West Coast and the other one's engaged and in Chicago. And I'm an immigration lawyer, actually. And that's what I've been. I've been a lawyer for 35 years this year.
Congratulations, Lori. That's quite a milestone. Could you share your experience with us?
Yes, I'd be glad to. And it really relates to my job. I've been working as an immigration lawyer for a number of years. And as I worked on in that area, I started to see that there were some problems with the system and, the system really needed to change. So I started to get involved with some national groups and then local groups about law change. And this was around the time when there was a lot of debate. I mean, I know there's still debate, but there was a lot of debate just starting about immigration law change. And so I had connected a bit with some local groups like Catholic Charities and others who were working on this issue. And at one point, there was a congressional hearing, public hearing that was being held in a city about 3 hours from us. And so I wanted to go, and another immigration lawyer also wanted to go. And then another friend of ours who was in a nonprofit world, he was originally from Mexico, but had immigrated to the States, and he wanted to go. So we all drove up there. And we went to the hearing, but there wasn't really any chance for public comment. But, and there were people sort of, you could tell just from the audience on both sides of the on both sides of the issue. And they even had security, they had police around and everything. And so we were leaving the hearing after it was over. People were walking to their cars in the parking lot. And I noticed there was a small group that was sort of across the street doing sort of a protest in a sense. I mean, they weren't causing trouble or anything. They were just holding some signs and maybe saying some chants or something. And, the most of the audience at the hearing, just because of where we live here in Iowa, most of the population is white, and most of the audience was Caucasian, but this group appeared to be maybe Latino. And I thought, well, it's possible that they actually are immigrants themselves or have immigrant family members. But I didn't think really too much about it. We were just going to our car. But then my friend, who was originally from Mexico, he said, well, can you just wait? I want to go over and talk to these people. So, I watched him walk over there, and he went and talked to them for a little while. And I started thinking, everyone here at this hearing, including me, we're interested in this issue. We care about it. It's my work and everything. But the people that he was talking to, if I was right about them being immigrants, they were actually really invested in this issue. I mean, this was their life or their family's life. And I realized that I shouldn't just be an observer, and also my friend thought I'm not really being with him if I just stand there and kind of watch. And so I thought, I think I have to cross the street and go over and join them. So I made that decision, and I walked across the street, and I just stood there with them and watched the other people go by and look at us. And, I think the police came over, and, I was a little nervous because I thought, well, there's police. I don't think we're doing anything wrong, but I didn't know what would happen. But police came over, I think, said, oh, make sure you're on the sidewalk or something like that, But so we stood there for a little while, and then, then we just got in our car and drove home. But I always remember that moment because it was the time when I realized that I needed to really enter into the reality of my clients and of the people I was advocating for, to get to know them, to get to understand their situation. And that was sort of the moment when that when that happened, when that, the Holy Spirit prompted me to do that. So I spent, many years really working. I could tell you lots of stories, Nick, but I spent many years of working more closely then with nonprofit groups and churches and places where I could really interact with people in a different way and see how I could help them, not by my own decision, but by what they really needed, and build those kind of relationships.
Thank you, Lori. I really liked how you made an effort to enter into the reality of your client and try to understand their situation. So thanks again, and best wishes to you.
Glad to help a little bit. So thank you, Nick.
Hi, Joe. Welcome to our podcast. It's nice to have you with us today.
Oh, yeah. It's really great being here. Thanks for having me.
Joe, I know that you're an avid musician and that you spent a number of years touring with the Focolaris International Performing Arts Group, Gen Rosso. What was that like?
Yeah, I don't know what an avid musician is, but I'm telling you, touring with Gen Rosso for so many years was an absolutely incredible experience.
Wonderful, Joe. Yes, I know what that's like, having had the opportunity to spend a couple of years with them myself. So before sharing your experience, Joe, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I consider myself a very lucky guy. I have a beautiful wife, 3 beautiful kids, 3 crazy dogs. Austin, Texas is a great town. It's a lot of fun, good people, a lot of good music. My wife, Sara Allegri, is a Pilates trainer, and we have a very successful Pilates studio, thanks to her. My kids are all doing well in school. I have a daughter on the varsity basketball team. My son's playing hockey. And my younger son, my youngest, he's very creative, loves to build things. He's my little scientist. Profession-wise, officially I am a teacher. I'm often teaching Pilates and helping people build their core so they can get their backs back in shape.
Thanks, Joe. It sounds like things are going pretty well there in Austin. We're all anxious now to hear your experience.
Yeah, I was raised on the border of an African-American ghetto in Chicago, a city with a long troubled history of racism. There was a strong contrast between the love and unity I felt in my family and the hate and division I lived on the streets. Most of the times, I felt like I was living in two worlds.
That must have been quite something, Joe. What were some of the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, every day was a challenge. I never knew if I was going to come back home all in one piece when I left for school in the morning. Dodging stones, bottles, even verbal threats from the neighborhood kids. Honestly, I never thought about why my parents made the decision to move into this neighborhood. But that didn't matter. I was raised as a Catholic by very devout Catholic parents who taught us that God loved everyone with no discrimination, and so should we. Little by little, as weeks turned into months and months turned into years, locals got the idea that we weren't leaving anytime soon, and we slowly became part of the streets, so to speak, talking, walking, dressing like everyone else. Gandhi put it nicely. He says, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. Mahatma Gandhi. That guy was cool. In a song called Neon Lights, and there's a part that goes, the world is my library and my life is an open book. I got no more shelves to lay upon, all the life my city took. Great white is on the scent before it takes its prey. It's gonna take a little more to catch me, baby. I'm a runaway. I guess that was just my way of saying that it's not gonna be so easy to get rid of me, because I wasn't going anywhere. And I felt like I was at home. Felt like God put me there for a reason. And I guess we were going to discover that together.
Joe, were you able to do anything that could help you integrate into the neighborhood?
With a group of friends, we organized basketball games, soup kitchens for the homeless, and other activities which really dug us deep into the community. We were always around people in need, and were constantly bombarded with praise for the good we were doing. And as a result, we had an even deeper sense of belonging. One night, though, after school, my brother and I were waiting for the bus in a pretty sketchy part of town, and it was getting dark. We both knew something was about to go down when we saw a couple hooded figures coming up at us from both sides. We know the routine. You say hello, apologize that we can't help you because we only have change for the bus. And right before things got really ugly, one of these gangsters looks up at me and says, "Hey, look, it's Larry and Joey from middle school. Oh man, leave these two alone, they're cool." We look at each other in relief, laughed the stress off a little, got on the bus, and made it home safe. I guess it paid off, respecting others and learning to do good, seek justice, relieve the oppressed, because it left a seed of love that was still inside this kid's heart and made him change his mind about robbing us and doing wrong. Some call it karma, but I call it God's reciprocal love from learning to do good.
Boy, you had me worried there for a moment, Joe. But yes, I'm a firm believer that when we do good, we often receive good in return. So thanks for joining us today, and thanks for sharing your experience.
It's my pleasure. Take care.
Joe's new single, entitled Neon Lights, will be available soon on all the major music platforms. So look for Joe Sopala on Spotify, DistroKid, Pandora, Amazon Music, and iTunes. So thank you for joining us today. I hope you have been inspired by the wonderful stories shared, and I look forward to being with you again next month. To listen to the commentary on the Word of Life, just go to the previous episode of this podcast. I invite you to join me each month for new episodes. And you can also read additional experiences in Living City magazine. Please consider making a donation to Focolare Media so that we can continue producing inspiring podcasts. Visit give.focolare.us. That is give.focolare.us. And look for the Focolare Media tab. Thank you in advance for your support. The Word of Life is translated into approximately 90 different languages and dialects, reaching millions worldwide through print, radio, TV, and other media. There are special versions for children and teens as well, which you can find at livingcitymagazine.com. This podcast has been brought to you by Focolare Media. Bye for now, and God bless.